Okay, folks, it's October. Here we go again. Not a talking bat this time. We're going to call this one loosely Talking Poland, but I'm going to be talking to Martin Bailey about a lot more than just Poland today. And I am chuffed and bits to have you here. Chuffed and bits? I'm not chuffed and bits. Middleton, get your gear into the right order. I am chuffed to bits to have Martin Bailey, the owner at Wildlife and Countryside Services, with me here today. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm good, thanks, Neil. Just getting over a cold though, so I'm a bit croaky.
Bit throaty, okay. Well, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. Well, it might be a problem. I suppose we'll find out in about 5 hours' time when this stops. Seriously, folks, this won't take 5 hours. Myself and Martin have known each other for a long time. We've done business with each other. We've drank with each other. We've been at conferences together. We've had the occasional meal together. So we know each other pretty darn well. But I reckon I'm probably going to find out a few things about him today that I probably didn't know. And I very much hope that you, the listening audience, will also find out a lot about him today as well. So, Martin, are you looking forward to this?
With a certain degree of trepidation, Neil.
Man, it's all good. It's all good. Seriously, it's all good. Let me very quickly introduce you, just to trepidize you even further. I don't even know if trepidize is a word. I'll get slagged off for that one, no doubt. So here we go. Martin is the owner of Wildlife and Countryside Services. His business and his home is based near Rhyl, which is in North Wales, within the United Kingdom. He describes himself as an experienced ecologist and biodiversity consultant, specializing in mammals, wildlife habitat creation and restoration, and also environmental education. On his Twitter stroke X feed, he describes himself as an ecological facilitator living in a wood, trying to be sustainable, trying to be ethical, and trying to help people. So, Martin, how do you feel about all of that? I know there's a lot more to you, but does that kind of sum you up? Was there anything else you'd like to add to my brief description there?
Yeah, I think that does sum it up quite well. One or two of those descriptions might be slightly out of date, but they're all still fairly valid.
Yeah, yeah. Where did it all start, Martin? I mean, were you born in Wales? What's your life history? Tell us the story.
Okay, in an hour? Okay, fine. Um, I was born somewhere near Birmingham, and I escaped when I was 18 months old when my parents moved to North Wales. And I've been here most of the time since then, although I did live in Scotland for a few years when I worked up there as a ranger. Um, so I went to school in North Wales, obviously. Not a Welsh school, unfortunately, so my Welsh is somewhat limited. Um, and I've always been interested in wildlife, mainly because when I was a kid, I was very shy and introverted, which may be hard to believe now. So basically, I didn't have any friends and wandered around the countryside instead, which was great.
Brilliant, brilliant. And during school, take did you take subjects that would have told you more about biology, for example? Did you go on after school to further education, or did you go on after school to do something else before you became a countryside ranger in Scotland?
I did biology as one of my topics in school, in high school, but I didn't go on to A levels. I didn't go on to further education, although I did an open university degree, or at least a part of one, which was biology, ecology related. Um, I'm basically self-taught. Um, yeah, so I spent most of my free time, of which there was quite a lot back then, um, being unemployed a lot of the time, wandering about the countryside and learning stuff.
So how do you what was your first job? Are you able to say what your first job was?
Yeah, my first job was as an apprentice electrician for a friend of
Ah,
my dad's.
okay.
which lasted the really long time of 10 months, and then I was made redundant. So
Okay.
that was the end of that. So I can wire a house, but of course I'm not certified. So
Okay. Right. So you're not offering that as a bolt-on product to the Wildlife and Countryside Services offerings. Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Yeah. You've heard it here first, folks. Okay. Do not get Martin at Wildlife and Countryside Services to wire your house. Okay. What did you do after the electrician job then? What takes you from there to being a countryside ranger in Scotland? What's the stepping stones?
Oh, you're pushing my memory now, Neil. I left there because, well, I left there. And then I was on, do you remember the Youth Opportunities Program?
Yeah. Yeah.
Long, long time ago, back in the 80s.
80s?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a couple of things. I worked for, did some work with the RSPCA animal shelter. I can't remember what the other things were. And then, to cut a long story short, I spent several years just bimbling about in North Wales, looking for wildlife, looking for pine martens in the forest, etc., with a friend of mine. And then I decided that I wanted to get some formal training, well, free training, basically, with something like RSPB or somebody like that, who I
Yeah.
had worked with before as a species protection volunteer and then paid officer from time to time with birds of prey and little terns and stuff. And I was aware that there was some kind of training program that they had. So I investigated that and found that it had just been shut down. So I looked a little bit further and found that Scottish Wildlife Trust were doing a ranger training thing. So I moved to Southwest Scotland and joined in with that. And the following year, I got a seasonal post as a ranger just up the road from where I was living at Drumlanrig Castle, which you may know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I did that for a few years, different places, different areas of Scotland, then ended up back in Wales. And sort of followed on from that with basically the idea that I didn't want to keep doing seasonal work, obviously, because it was, had its limitations. I also didn't want to suddenly find myself posted to somewhere near, I don't know, Reading or next to a motorway or somewhere like that for a
Okay.
permanent
Okay.
job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I decided to try and set up something on my own of a similar ilk. But I couldn't work out what to do and how to do it. But then I got an inquiry from Paul Bright, Professor Paul Bright, I think he is, at Royal Holloway College in London. He wanted somebody to do a dormouse survey of 165 random woods in North Wales. So I put myself up for that and ended up spending 3 months wandering about the woods in a Land Rover, trying to implement their methodology,
Okay.
which was, well, basically useless for North Wales because our habitat is completely different to the south of England, and it didn't work. So I spent 3 months not finding dormice, which we've subsequently found in various woods in North Wales. At the end of it, I was somewhat frustrated because I'd basically spent 3 months groveling around on the ground looking for hazelnuts, which largely weren't there because we don't have large crops of hazelnuts in North Wales. And I was so frustrated, I looked through the maps and I realized there were a couple of woods on Anglesey where I'd been told not to go, basically.
Okay.
It wasn't part of their methodology to do Anglesey. So, of course, me being me, I went across to Anglesey in my own time and started wandering around a forest, which is Pentraeth Forest in the east side of Anglesey, where I met a guy, a biologist, who was wandering through on his own little path. We happened to intersect in the middle of the forest. I was looking for heavily fruiting hazel, which didn't exist. And he was wandering through with a big plastic bag with ink on his fingers. And I thought, right, he's a biologist. Let's speak to him. This turned out to be Dr. Craig Shuttleworth, who's now a very good friend of mine. He was working on the Anglesey Red Squirrel project, which had just started the previous year. And within 2 weeks, I was working on the Anglesey Red Squirrel project as assistant project officer, which I did for 3 or 4 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And we successfully saved the remnant population of about 30 or 40 red squirrels from the grey invasion, and subsequently reintroduced red squirrels to Anglesey, and they are now spreading across onto the mainland, where of course they have to face grey squirrels again.
Wow. Okay. So
that
there
takes
you
us up to
go.
about 1990. No, that takes us up to about 2004.
Right, so that then must get very close now to the birth of Wildlife and Countryside Services, or is there another stepping stone before that?
Well, the business was actually started in 1999 when I did the Dormouse survey. I decided to go self-employed because I was being employed, basically, or contracted, I should say. And so it went on from there. So the business itself had actually started, but it wasn't, of course, what it is now. How it developed was I found myself needing specialist equipment, basically. And being who I am, I decided I didn't really want to pay full whack for the kit because I didn't have a great deal of money at the time. So I set up, the website was there. I decided to ask suppliers if they were happy for me to add their products to the website to sell, so I could get them at trade. And then, of course, if I wanted to buy them myself, I would. So that's what I did. So it started off with just a handful of products, a handful of suppliers, and it grew. And it's still growing.
Yeah, yeah. And did you anticipate back then, at that point when you're having these initial conversations with suppliers and you're getting the first products through the door, from what you're saying there, first and foremost in your mind seems to be this is a way whereby you can get some items at a cheaper rate than what you would have to pay if you went retail with the suppliers. Yeah. At that point, was it your vision for it to end up being a full-on retail operation like you've got now? Or was it just like a natural evolution that at that point you probably didn't really anticipate that that's the way that life was going to go? I mean, what do you think in that context?
Yeah, I certainly didn't want it to go that way at the time. I was a field worker. I wanted to be out in the field, looking at wildlife, learning about stuff, hopefully doing something useful at the same time. It was just the means to get equipment that I couldn't really afford at a lower price.
Yeah.
But as I say, it grew. People started buying stuff.
That's a bugger that when you get customers, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So yeah, people started buying stuff occasionally, so that gave me a little bit of an income. Not very much, of course, to start with, but I gradually found that people were asking about stuff that I hadn't got on the website. So I then had to speak to other suppliers and get other stuff on the website. And it just gradually got bigger and bigger. And you realize after a while that, okay, well, I'm selling this product or service, and therefore I need to have this on the website as well. I'm doing bat surveys, for instance. Therefore, I need to have mitigation products, bat boxes available. So that opens up a whole other tranche of suppliers, whether it's Schwegler boxes or from Nest Box Company or whoever. Basically, I was getting stuff from all over the place, from wherever I felt was necessary to keep the range of products relevant to what my clients needed.
Yeah, yeah. And where are we today then? What does life look like today in terms of the business? You've got this website that's up there, folks. if you check the show notes, we will have a link to wildlifeservices.uk. You're pretty much full-time running this retail business. I know you do other things as well, which we'll talk about later, including the trips to Poland and all the rest of it. But is this pretty much what you're doing 5 days a week now? Are you ever getting the opportunity to do survey work, professional survey work, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it is pretty much full time now, which is not what I was aiming for. I don't really want to be sitting behind a desk all the time, but that is necessary to some extent to basically to service my clients. It is now all about clients. I refer to them as clients rather than customers. It's not just a transactional relationship like with other suppliers, should we say.
Okay.
We have personal relationships with our clients and we look after them to a much higher level. So it's the same as working with a bat survey client, for instance. You have to look after them. You have to guide them. You have to make sure that you give them the best possible service so that they can achieve what they want to achieve within the law, obviously. So it's kind of gone from that to the sort of providing the products, the mitigation products and things like that. But I also do some survey work. I do the survey work that I'm best qualified to do, which doesn't include bats.
Okay.
I am not at a level that I can provide the best service to my clients doing bat work.
Okay. Yeah.
So I won't do it. I may assist with surveys from time to time, but that's not my primary thing. I want my clients to get the best service, so I subcontract to people I know can provide a much better service than I can.
Okay.
Which means that obviously they get some business, I get some business, I still get to help my clients. And I just focus on survey work that I particularly enjoy. Badgers is one of the things I'm very good at. But there are a few other things that I might dip my toe into now and then just to get myself out in the field and do what I was doing, 20 years ago.
Yeah. But when you're not actually looking after your clients, you're living in a very kind of, you describe it as living in a woodland. Yeah. I know you're quite far off the beaten track, so to speak. You're surrounded by wildlife. I know that you're constantly looking at what's going on around your land and all the rest of it. So you're kind of, I'm imagining, I've never been to your property, but I'm imagining you're kind of immersed in nature where you are. Is that a fair impression that I've got there? Yeah.
Well, as I say, we do live in a wood or on the edge of a wood. The bit of land that we're on used to be a field. It's now rewilded itself, which is great. I was out in the garden this morning and a whole bunch of long-tailed tits came through. And then a couple of tree creepers turned up at the same time, and there was blue tits and great tits and, the usual robins and blackbirds and things flitting about all at the same time in our little orchard, which was brilliant. I always stop what I'm doing for long-tailed tits because they're so cool.
Yeah. Like flying ping pong balls. Yeah. Or lollipops.
Yeah. So yes, in that respect, we're in a wood, so what's not to like. But it's a wood on an estate which is a shooting estate. So at the moment we're surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of little pheasants.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Bloody things. We don't have reptiles here because, presumably because of all the pheasants every bloody year. We are, as you mentioned earlier, near Rhyl, uncomfortably near Rhyl, which is the drug capital of North Wales.
Okay.
That's now 2.5 fields away from us. It was 3 fields, but it's now 2.5 fields. We can hear the main road from here.
Okay.
So it's not as remote as I would like, not by a long shot. But it's the best option at the moment. It does have advantages. We just have to, suck it up. Life's not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that might lead us. No, no, let's not go to Poland just yet. I was trying to give you a little bit of a lead in there, and I'm actually astonished, Martin, you didn't grasp it. I was talking about you being immersed in wildlife and stuff, and I thought he's going to come back at me and say, if you really want to be immersed in wildlife in a place that's a lot more like what it's supposed to be, we should go to Poland. But let's not go to Poland just yet. I just want to give you this opportunity to just say to our listening audience, what makes wildlife and countryside services different from any of the competitors you might have in this part of the world? What do you feel is your unique selling point? Okay, which is a term that gets used a lot, but what makes you guys different? Yeah,
I think it's an actual genuine personalized service. If you ring us up, and you can ring us up, unlike some suppliers, you can ring us up and you can speak to somebody who knows what they're talking about. There are many suppliers out there, not necessarily our two main competitors, although we don't call them competitors. But many suppliers out there, you have a hard job actually speaking to anybody because they don't answer their phones.
yeah,
Those that you can ring up, and I do include our competitors here, you can speak to people who know about the products, hopefully, that they're selling, but they're not ecologists. They don't understand the ins and outs of which bat box is best for which species, other than what it says on their website or their supplier's website. They have no grasp of what you need to do to enhance biodiversity, for instance, which, as you alluded to, that's one of the reasons we go to Poland. But I did mean to say that where we live here is actually very unbiodiverse.
yeah, yeah,
There is not a lot here. It's farmland. It's a game estate. It's denuded, it's degraded, and there are so many things missing that it's a wonder that things are still functioning ecologically.
yeah.
So it's all this sort of stuff that I understand, and I can relate all that to what's the best thing to do for whatever. You want to enhance the biodiversity on your land. What do you do? Well, there's a whole bunch of people out there who will tell you various things, but unless they've actually seen what the ecology should be like, which you can't in the UK because it's basically fucked up, then you can't actually give the advice people need because you don't have the knowledge yourself. So I'm able to basically take all the knowledge I've gathered over the last, lifetime, and put it all together with equipment and other products that we sell and services, and advise people in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of that knowledge. I obviously don't know everything I need to know yet, and never will, but I know a lot more than most suppliers, if not all suppliers in the UK, about this stuff, because I've been doing it since I was 12.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that takes us nicely on to Poland, and I just kind of want to say this. There's something that we've been talking about there about, and this wouldn't necessarily be an ecologist's perception, okay, but we've got to remember here, folks, that despite the fact that we're in, let's call it the ecology sector, and we all pal around and work with and do things with other people that are either ecologists, zoologists, conservationists, however they want to describe themselves. For the bulk of the people out there, okay, the bulk of the public, they would maybe go to somewhere like a location where Martin's business is based and would say things like, oh, it's wonderful here. Look at the trees. Oh my goodness, the wildlife is amazing. There's all of these pheasants floating around. Aren't they beautiful? And okay, other things as well, like tree creepers, long-tailed tits, maybe passing roe deer or whatever. But, the bulk of people, because they don't fully understand this subject, they look at something like an area that Martin's been describing there and just think this is a wonderful place for wildlife, isn't it amazing, etc., etc. And Martin, as you've alluded to, as you've said, that impression that 99.9% of the population of probably Western Europe would get about the countryside, it's not really an accurate reflection of reality, so to speak. Yeah. So there's your lead in now to either agree with me, disagree with me, and tell us why southern Poland and why you're so passionate about that area.
Yeah, well, I'll start off with answering your point. We're all familiar in our field about the shifting baseline syndrome. It's shifted a long way. We all know it's shifted a long way because things are different from when we were kids. But most people, including many or most ecologists, haven't thought about it critically and actually realized that it was mostly gone before any of us were born. So, we have lost a lot since we were kids, and you and I are a similar age, Neil. But most of it was already gone long before we were born.
Yeah.
So we have no concept of how much has been lost unless we can see it for ourselves somewhere. So, and you're right when you say that people say, oh, they come to North Wales, or they go to Cumbria, and they say, oh, look at this beautiful natural landscape. And it's about as unnatural as you could possibly get. Ecologically, most of it is dead, certainly Cumbria. Grass-covered hills. It's not natural. So far from it. I mean, it's basically dead. So where we go, the best and most important thing about where we go in Southeast Poland is that the species complement is almost identical to what is or was in the UK.
Yeah.
And we're talking just 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, depending on which species or species group you're thinking about. But as far as insects and plants is concerned, 100 years is probably pretty damn close to what we used to have before intensive agriculture kicked off. You could go further back and say, right, okay, well, 1500 years or whatever the figure is. For lynx, there are still lynx where we go. There are wolves. The wild boar, yes, we've got wild boar in the UK, but not many. They're fairly localized still. Beavers are another good example. Yes, you can see beavers in the UK. Most of them are in enclosures. And even the ones that are living free, they haven't been here very long. So the benefits that they've created in terms of habitat, it's not as extensive as if you go somewhere where they've been for decades or hundreds of years even. So we go to Poland and we see extensive beaver-created landscape, which is phenomenal. And the whole place, the whole ecosystem they create is heaving with everything from fish to invertebrates to, there's reptiles galore, grass snakes swimming about by the hundreds. Bird life is just stunning because you've basically got willow scrub, which so much bird life loves. And of course, habitat like that is very, very rare in the UK. So species like marsh warbler are pretty damn common where you've got beavers well established. In the UK, as far as I'm aware, they're pretty damn rare.
Yeah.
I've never seen or heard one in the UK. And that goes for most species. Most stuff in the UK is pretty damn rare throughout most of the country, if not extinct. Invertebrates. When did you last go to a flower-rich meadow? And you basically couldn't hear yourself think for insects singing, crickets and other stuff, just buzzing away, thrumming in the undergrowth, surrounded by scrubby thorn bushes with redback shrikes, and lizards and snakes skittering through the grasses. This is a habitat that you cannot find in the UK, as far as I'm aware. You can find quite a few meadows that are full of wildflowers, but they're not full of life.
Right. Okay.
You know, the animal life is just not there. Certainly not to the same extent as we can see. You know,
So
you
we
can,
may think it's there
yeah,
because we're seeing some stuff moving around, we're hearing some birds singing, we're seeing some insects, but we've got nothing, but we've got no benchmark to compare that to, in your
yeah,
opinion, unless we visit somewhere like southern Poland, the areas that you go to then go, oh my word, this is what it's supposed to be like, or this is much closer to what it's supposed to be like. Yeah.
yeah, because it's all relative. So we are comparing a good habitat like a flower-rich meadow with a sheep pasture
Yeah, or a brownfield site or something
or a
like that. Yeah.
brownfield site or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, something that
Yeah.
is equally dead.
Yeah.
There may be more, as you say, there may be more invertebrates. There may be more butterflies, for instance, in a flower-rich meadow in the UK than on a brownfield site, or a sheep pasture, certainly than the sheep pasture. But you're not surrounded by dozens and dozens and dozens of fritillaries and blues and browns and a whole myriad different species of butterfly and moth and crickets and pretty much anything you can think of, reptile. You know, you're not in a situation where you could sit basically in one spot and not move for an hour because there's so much to look at.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you'd have to walk through the meadow to actually see stuff. Whereas the meadows we go to, you can take an entomologist or a botanist and you can plonk them down in a meadow because they don't fancy going for a walk along the roads. And you can come back 4 hours later and they've barely moved.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're
You know,
still seeing stuff and engaging with
yeah,
stuff. You know,
they've got hundreds of meters of meadow to go through, and they're still where you've left them 4 hours later.
Yeah.
So that is the difference. In the UK, you could take a walk down any country lane, anywhere in the country. And if you stop whenever you see something and look and then move on, basically you'll find yourself covering quite a lot of ground, quite a number of miles, and not actually seeing a great deal. Whereas in Poland, we go along the little lanes and you're stopping every couple of feet or less to see something new. So you can walk, I think our record now is less than a mile in 4 hours.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And we saw a whole gamut of species, including the beaver habitat, and we saw golden eagle, we heard quail, we saw lots of lizards, more invertebrates that you could shake a stick at, you know, redback shrikes, purple emperors, a whole range of species that are rare or extinct in the UK. And they were there within a mile, just walking along a track.
A random location that you just happened to engage with many years ago where you thought, wow, this is an amazing place. I need to take people to see this. Do you want to talk just very briefly about the backdrop as to how did you get connected to that area in the first place, and where did the trips to Poland, where did that idea come from?
It was as much a surprise to me as anybody else. A friend that I know who's Polish, she approached me one day and she said she had a friend from Poland who wanted to come and see me and talk about what it was that I did with wildlife. So I said, yeah, fine. So he came along and he has a bed and breakfast setup. They call it agro-touristica, so agro-tourist setup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he had mainly Polish guests. And he had worked out, because he works in the UK from time to time as a healthcare worker, he worked out that UK people have more money than Polish people on the whole. So he wanted to know if I could bring people to Poland to see what the wildlife was like. I said, well, yeah, in principle, but I don't know what the wildlife is like. He says, well, come on over. So I went over there for the first time in 2013 in the winter. And if you go back to that slide with the snowscape on it, that was the first winter, the first time I went there. And as you can see, it was a perfect snowscape. You know,
Yeah.
every little twig had a layer of snow on it, perfect blue skies all week. I was tracking wolves and wild boar and all sorts of stuff in the snow. There wasn't a great deal of wildlife about because it's winter and most of the stuff is buggered off for the winter.
Yeah.
But it was such a stunning landscape. I was totally blown away with it. I was wandering around all day in this landscape, just tracking things or just enjoying the scenery. And I was absolutely blown away by how beautiful it was. So at the end of the week, my new friend said, well, what do you think? I said, well, it's brilliant, but I haven't seen any wildlife. He said, well, you better come back in the summer then. So I did.
Okay. Yeah.
And having already been blown away once with seeing no wildlife, I was now surrounded by more wildlife than I had ever seen in my life anywhere. And I just had a great deal of trouble trying to reconcile this with the state of the UK because I was very quickly aware that the species were pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert botanist, but I recognized a lot of the plants. I'm not an expert entomologist, but I recognized a lot of the butterfly species and other species, even if I'd never actually seen them for myself in the wild in the UK. They were very, very familiar. The habitats were very, very familiar, except I'd never seen them on such an extensive scale. You know, scrubby grassland, for instance, woodland edge, scrubby woodland edge. You know, this is the stuff that wildlife needs and that we simply don't have in most of the UK anymore. And I was so blown away by this and the fact that it showed me very, very clearly how little I knew about ecology. Because I profess to be an ecologist. I've studied wildlife all my life since the age of 12, or possibly sooner than that even. I understood about species like beaver because, you know, I've read the books. I know that beavers create habitat. I know they're habitat creators. They are biodiversity enhancers. They're ecosystem engineers. I knew all the terminology. I knew what they did. And then I went over them and I saw what they'd been doing over decades. And I thought, I know nothing.
Yeah.
You know, until I came here and saw this for myself, I knew nothing. Now, I'm not your average man in the street. At that time, I was not your average guy in the street who knows bugger all and thinks that, you know, Cumbria is a beautiful natural place. I'm pretty well informed. And I soon realized that I had to try and get this across to people. And the best analogy I could come up with was that ecologists or conservationists, or however you want to term them, people who want to recreate biodiverse landscapes in the UK, mostly what they're doing is trying to do a really, really, really complicated jigsaw puzzle with most of the pieces missing and no picture. Now, I'd seen the picture.
Okay.
And when you see the picture, you realize the pieces that are missing. you
Okay.
can
Yeah.
identify the pieces that are missing, whether that is specific habitat like woodland edge or scrub, whatever, or whether it's particular species like purple emperor butterflies or sand lizards or redback shrikes. Redback shrike is a good example because they need scrub. And they're basically extinct as a breeding bird in the UK, apart from the odd pair here and there. So having seen this big picture, I realize how many pieces are missing and how little people in the UK, including most ecologists, because most ecologists have never seen a landscape so full of wildlife, so full of biodiversity, that is directly relatable to the UK because they're the same species. You can go to the south of France. You go to the south of France, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The habitats there are significantly different.
Yeah.
And the species composition is significantly different. There would probably overlap. There'll be some
Yeah.
similarities. And the structure of the habitat is probably very similar. But the species composition is, I would guess, significantly different, or at least substantially different.
Yeah,
Because
I wouldn't disagree with you. I wouldn't
yeah,
disagree with
you've
that.
got a lot of stuff in the south of France that doesn't
Has,
occur
has never occurred in the British
exactly.
Isles. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas what we see in southeast Poland, pretty much everything, there are exceptions, of course, but pretty much everything has occurred at one point in the UK within the last few hundred years.
And you can take even further than that, Martin. And look, this is not a criticism. It's just the way that it is. Yeah. But you know, people like myself, okay, if I just turn the spotlight on me, okay, people like myself, I've been to places like Costa Rica and various African countries and Borneo and all the rest of it, yeah. But and and some of the stuff I've seen in some of the parts of the world have been absolutely amazing, okay, in terms of species richness and an experience and something to relate to. But, you know, sitting in the Serengeti, right, in Tanzania, right, there's no relationship at all to anything that you would do in, the UK, for argument's sake, or anywhere in anywhere in Europe, probably.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But there are also a lot of ecologists who've not been outside the UK,
yeah, of
which is
course, yeah,
surprising to me.
yeah.
So you've got that huge gap of knowledge. And we're all trying to improve things for wildlife in the UK, whether we call ourselves conservationists or ecologists or whatever. But we're largely doing it in the same way we've always done it, which has been shown to not work.
And we're doing it in a way that we've been shown by others to do it
Yeah.
who don't necessarily have the context, or we're doing it in a way that we've been taught or educated to do it through university courses, college courses, that again by people who have not necessarily they themselves got the wider context, because I don't know. I mean, it could be a university supervisor, for argument's sake, and they know an awful lot about, for argument's sake, the Amazon basin or something like that. Yeah, that's their thing. So that's what they're majoring on when they're asking the students to think about, projects and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so much not so much misinformation, but well, it is misinformation.
Yeah, but
It's
it's not done through
not
malice.
not
It's
deliberate.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we have
yeah,
a lot of assumptions in the UK as to what
yeah,
species need. So, I'm forever being told by people who don't know any better because they, it's Joe Public, if you like. But, they're saying, well, red squirrels require conifer forest. There's, even if you get rid of the grey squirrels, the red squirrels are just going to be in the conifer forest. Absolutely blatantly wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You have people saying that, oh, nightingales, yes, they like a nice bit of woodland. Well, no, not really. They like woodland edge. They like scrubby habitat. Purple emperors, everybody said, right, okay, you think of a purple emperor, you think, right, oak woods. You go to an oak wood, you'll see the purple emperors flying above the trees, which may be the case if you've got woodland edge again. Because you have to think about the whole lifestyle of the animal that you're thinking about. Purple emperors, they breed on sallow. They lay their eggs on sallow, which is a willow, which grows in wetland. So it's outside the forest, or it's on the small water courses that go through the forest. They're not a species that lives in the forest. They will do their display dances or display flights along the woodland edge above the trees, yes. But we see them in southeast Poland along the lanes. We walk up the lanes and they are there on the road, and they're feeding on either shit or roadkill.
Yeah.
Because they're after the minerals. Yeah. That's where we see them. That is the best place to see them. And they'll, certainly in the past, they've landed on us to sample our sweat, because that's what they like, that's what they need. But of course, they also need the habitat. They need the sallow to lay their eggs on, and the other habitat that's required. So we've got so many misconceptions about what species need, because we associate, understandably to some extent, where rare species are found now, we associate them with that habitat, and we assume that that is their preferred habitat because that's where they are found now.
But in fact, what's maybe in some cases, what's maybe more the case is the reason those species are there is because that's pretty much the only option they've got left to them now.
Exactly. They've gone to suboptimal habitat because the optimal habitat has gone.
Yeah.
So what we then do is we try and recreate more of that suboptimal habitat in the hope that we're going to save that species or save that population or whatever, without actually thinking it through and realizing that, well, if we do that with suboptimal habitat, that's not going to be any bloody good at all long term. What you need to do is you need to recreate and enhance optimal habitat. And the only way you can know what the optimal habitat is to see that species in that optimal habitat. But if that optimal habitat no longer exists in the UK or is very, very rare, how the hell are you going to do that? Yeah. You have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, you need a roadmap, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a poor choice of words for what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You need to see that big picture. It's like the jigsaw puzzle. You've got to have the picture on the front of the box.
Yeah.
To be able to see where all the bits are supposed to go and to see which bits are missing.
Yeah. So folks, if you go to wildlifeservices.co.uk/Poland.html, you will find out all about the trips that Martin organises to southern Poland. Okay, it's very close, I think, to what would have been the previous Czechoslovakian border. It's now Czechia. Is that how you pronounce that country now?
Czechia? No, it's not actually there. It's further east.
It's further east. Oh, so is it above?
You can see Krakow.
Okay, Krakow. So is it between Krakow and Slovakia, roughly? Yeah.
If you go east of Krakow to Rzeszów,
okay,
and then south to the Slovakian border,
right,
that's where we are.
Right, so it's just right there in that southeastern, far southeastern corner of Poland.
It's the Lower Carpathians.
Okay, okay. So folks, to find out about that, check it out on the website and get in contact with Martin if you're interested or curious even about finding out about the logistics, how you get there, when he goes, how often he goes, all this kind of stuff. It's all there on the website, but goodness, if you're half interested, You're listening to him here. He's a friendly, approachable, knowledgeable guy. Okay, he's not a scary person. Give him a phone and talk to him about it. I mean, actually, Martin, I know you are quite scary, but I'm just kind of seriously, I'm just winding him up. Not a scary person at all. So lift the phone and chat to him. But Martin, when you're not retailing, when you're not, going to Poland. I know you've got a couple of other quite interesting in different ways things that you get involved with. In one instance, you are a marine mammal medic in association with the British Divers Marine Life Rescue organisation. You've been doing that for, goodness, almost 4 years, 3.5 years, I think. And apart from that, you're also an equipment and training officer, incident controller, and responder for 4x4 Response Wales. Do you want to tell us a little bit about these things that you do? Yeah.
Yeah, these are things that are quite close to my heart. The 4x4 response stuff basically was because I drive 4x4s. You can see the picture of my old Land Rover there, which is sadly off the road and has been for a while.
Yeah.
But I currently have a small fleet of different 4x4s. I became involved with 4x4 response a long time ago now. We help the emergency services, basically. We provide transport and logistics for people or equipment for the fire service, the police, the ambulance service, NHS, county councils, and mountain rescue, etc. So that's basically what we do. We transport stuff in difficult conditions, whether that's bad weather or difficult terrain, or sometimes both. The British Divers Marine Life Rescue is something I stumbled across. I'm not a diver. In fact, I can't swim. At least, not enough to swim a great deal of distance. But I decided to join up with them. They help wildlife in trouble. So seals and cetaceans, dolphins, whales. So we respond to those where we have seal pups at the moment. It's pupping season, so there are seal pups turning up in all sorts of strange places where they really are. It's not best for them. Beaches where people walk their dogs. We get a lot of seals bitten by dogs.
Yeah.
And of course, we have stranded cetaceans, dolphins, and such like, and occasionally whales, which fortunately I've not had to deal with that yet, but it does happen. And so I like to help out with that. So, that's another little thing, a little string to my bow, voluntary work. It's all voluntary, both of those things. And it keeps me out of mischief, and it adds an extra bit of excitement for a life that is largely spent behind a desk these days.
Okay, interesting stuff. And as you say, it gets shouting about, it gets you meeting people in different situations, and both of these things are extremely worthwhile and important things to be involved with. And thankfully, there are organisations such as those that provide the services that they provide. Yeah. Look, as a thank you to many of our guests on our talking series, we quite often make charitable donations on our guests' behalf. And Martin has asked us to make a donation on his behalf to an organisation called Wild Justice. This will not be the first time, as it happens, that BatAbility has made a donation to Wild Justice. We have had guests in the past asking us to donate to this organisation. Martin, do you want to tell me a little bit about why you want your donation to go to Wild Justice, please?
I think the main thing is that Wild Justice seem to they punch above their weight. They have achieved quite a lot in a very short time since they formed. birds of prey are a thing that I've had a great deal of interest in for a very long time, since my voluntary work with RSPB back in the 80s, with ospreys and merlins and peregrines and such like. So their work with hen harriers and other raptors that are persecuted illegally it's close to my heart. They also do a lot of other good work for other species, and they help other organizations with their campaigns. So they do a lot of valuable work, and if we can support them a little bit, I think that's got to be a good thing.
Brilliant. Well, our donation will be winging its way to Wild Justice over the next couple of days. And along with that, we will also have social media. Well, we'll also have social media activity that will thank Martin for his time today, and also mention the donation to Wild Justice to give them a little bit more visibility. Look, that's taking us pretty much towards the end of today's talking session, talking Poland. We did talk mostly about Poland, which is good, that's what myself and Martin anticipated we were going to do. I've learned a few things about Martin that I didn't know before. I've learned a few things about his business and a few things about Poland that I didn't know before. I hope you, the listener, has found this informative, educational, enjoyable. Anything else that you might have found it? I hope that is the case, all being positive. Martin, how have you found it?
It's always good to have a chat with you, Neil. Thanks for the invitation, much appreciated. Hopefully it's at the very least got a few people thinking about what they know about wildlife and what they think they know about wildlife, and maybe some of the things that they don't know about wildlife and ecology and biodiversity and such like.
Yeah, I think it certainly has. It certainly has. And folks, in the show notes underneath today's session, you will find a link to Martin's Wildlife and Countryside Services website, as well as a link to the Poland trips, and also a link to Wild Justice. You'll find all of those links underneath in the show notes. Martin, what I like to do at this stage is I like to get our guest to close things off and say goodbye to our audience. Before you do that, however, I'm just going to say, Martin, it's been an honour and a pleasure talking to you. This interview was long overdue. I'm glad we finally got around to doing it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and had a huge amount of benefit from it, and you certainly get me thinking about things. So, you know, a massive, massive thank you on behalf of me and all of our listeners to you for your time today. If you just want to close things off by saying goodbye to our listeners, we will end things there. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, everybody, for watching this, and hopefully you found it very useful.